Well, in case you didn't know, a lot is going on right now around WVU, around the football program. WVU has finally, for some, decided to part ways and fire Neal Brown. The news officially came down Sunday evening. Not too surprising, but now is finally setting the wheels in motion for the next chapter of Mountaineer football. Mike Asti, Cody Nespor, and we are going to react. So I'm going to steal a phrase from somebody else out there in the YouTube podcast space, actually a WVE broadcaster, and tell you this is an emergency pod because WVU fires Neal Brown, and now a national coaching search is underway. Hit up our coverage, WV Sports Now. We have a lot there, and that is an understatement because this is a story that is going to unravel in the days and weeks to come. It involves recruiting. It involves National Signing Day coming up that might be heavily reduced for the Mountaineers. I'd check in more in February. It involves who's going to be the new coach. It involves player reaction from former players, current players, and they don't sound too happy, actually, even though most of the fans, I would say 99.9% of the fans are. It involves Pat McAfee telling you that he's now involved in this search when he definitely wasn't involved in the last one, even though he's now come back to being welcomed to being a part of Mountaineer Nation. Not that he shouldn't have been in the past, but he's definitely more involved now and a lot more. So, Cody, to kick this off, obviously the program is now parting ways with Neal Brown. Now, we did talk on our last show, the smoke was dying out, and I know other colleagues of ours agreed, but that was prior to then losing 52-15 in Lubbock, a game that nobody really thought they would win, even though it could have been 7 wins and got a winning season. It's a horrible road trip, but they didn't just lose. They basically didn't show up. They were never competitive in that game, and it was just one of the worst days for Neal Brown in his tenure as WVU's head coach and his last. So, number one, what's your reaction to this finally happening? And number two, how much of a factor do you think Saturday's miserable performance played into this, or do you think this was inevitable regardless, even if he would have won that game?
No, I think that's a game that gets you fired. I think that's even just a second quarter that gets you fired.
Yeah.
Because it's like, watching it happen, it's like the team looked helpless, and the team was helpless. And I don't know. A lot of people said it, but I don't know if you're Wren Baker, I don't know how you watch a game like that with a coach that's on the hot seat and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, we'll just bring him back next year," right? Because like that. Because if you had told me
It's a
Friday,
tough sell. Yep.
if you had told me Friday they were going to fire Neal, I would have been surprised.
Okay.
Telling me yesterday they were going to fire Neal, I'd be like, "Of course they are." Didn't you see that game?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
everybody jokes that Neal always did just enough to keep his job. It's almost
He
like
did
it was
enough to lose it. Yes.
he did enough to lose it this week, which is so
Yeah.
ironic in what has happened the last few years.
Yeah. And I definitely was at a point prior to kickoff that I no longer would have been surprised with literally any result. I wouldn't have been surprised if Neal Brown was going to stay on for one more year because it is an easier schedule to start next year. It is going to be a mess in recruiting that we're now dealing with. It is going to be a mess in the portal. It's not a guarantee you hit a home run. Some of those home runs, Signetti, for example, that fans obviously would want and has ties, he's off the board. But I also, at that time, even before kickoff, would not have been surprised if they did part ways or fire Neal Brown or had a mutual parting of ways. I think the one thing that may have been a difference here, because I can confirm, and everybody knows this, Wren Baker, Gordon Gee, the WVU brass, they do like Neal Brown. He's a good guy. I don't think they wanted it to come to this. I think Wren Baker was happy when it worked out last year and they won 9 games. They won a bowl. He was lifting a trophy at the end of the year. You had the Neal Breezy shirts going on. A lot of the fans who were off the climb were back on the climb. I think he was happy. I think that's what he wanted. I think he wanted that to occur again. And even if they didn't win 9 again, he could say harder schedule. I think if they got to a 7-8 win bar, he might have been able to sell it for one more year with an easier path to open up next season. And obviously new rules, a lot going on in college football with NAL and all of that, he might have been able to sell it. I don't think he wanted this to be the result in his heart of hearts. But with all of that said, I do think that Saturday's result was a factor because if nothing else, even if you think he was always going to get fired, and I think that was always in play regardless, just because I do think there kind of was a ceiling that Wren realized with the program under Neal Brown. And obviously all the fans were out. The billboards are a real thing. I think he was worried about tickets and attendance and the mark it would leave in the program next year and into the future. So I think he could have got fired even if they won that game. I do think if they won that game, he would have coached the bowl game. And if they were going to fire him, they would have done it in January, which also would have saved them money. I think Saturday's result was a factor because it forced their hand to not be able to save the money and to do it now. If they would have waited till January, the fan base would have been outside the facility picketing probably. And I think Wren realized that. But I also think, Cody, that if you go to kind of connect it to the Dana scenario, or even with Rich Rod leaving, or even with kind of an ousting and Bill Stewart and all the drama there that involved Dana and even the end of Don Nalen, WVU has not legitimately, the football program, fired a coach where they announce it as, we are firing you, in a long damn time. There have been other scenarios that occurred when they parted ways. So I think that if they either won or had a closer effort, it might have been a mutual parting of ways. They might have had that be the announcement that we come to terms together and we're giving him X number of dollars, but we're going to part ways and wish him well. But 52-15, I don't think you can even do a mutual parting of ways. Yeah. I don't think you can wait till January. I don't think you can keep him under any circumstances. And even though Wren did not want this to be the scenario, I think when he saw that game, he realized, I literally have to do this. I have to do this soon, and it has to be a firing. I'm going to say he's a good guy, which was the first word in the quote, if you saw it. He is. We know it. But I think he knew at that point, even in his talks with Neal, he probably said to him, this has to be worded as you're fired, because that was horrendous. I mean, that was a dumpster fire in Lubbock. And I was expecting Brown to kind of know that too and kind of give you a quick, like, I know it was bad and, we'll see you. But he gave you an essay after the game nonetheless. But I think that forced the hand to be happening this way. So it did play a role. But I don't know if I would have been shocked if it happened anyway. But it had to happen this way when you lose that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I kind of talked about, like, there was a possibility that they do negotiate a mutual separation where it's not the full buyout, but Neal doesn't, technically get fired. We did talk about that. And I do think that was always, but it is like, like you said it, like it almost in this scenario, because of how bad that game was, Wren now becomes like the good guy. Right? Where like a mutual parting of ways is so neutral. Now it's, and I'm sure this doesn't factor.
That would have made Wren seem weak to the fans, I think. I think if he did mutual parting of ways or not fired him after that game, the fans who for the most part are pro Wren, even if they're obviously not pro Neal Brown during this tenure, and Wren did decide to keep him last year, I think he would have lost some favor. I think that would have looked bad.
It is kind of like in with the statement they put out, it obviously didn't throw Neal under the bus at all, right? Really made him sound good. But it is kind of like, I don't know, it does almost paint Neal as the bad guy and Wren as the, hero that is going to save the football program.
Well, that's what Wren wants to be the case. This is Wren Baker's career achievement here. He's in his 40s.
Yeah.
Maybe WVU is not the job he's at for the rest of his life, but if he ever wants a job at Ohio State or one of those programs to come calling, he needs to hit a home run here. He obviously had to do the same thing with the basketball program recently and a lot of other programs around the athletic department. And right now it looks like the basketball hire is working out. Certainly the women's has been working out. We'll see baseball when he decided to just ascend Sabins. We'll see if volleyball can kind of turn it around. They have a tough road to go. But even taking into consideration DeVries and men's basketball and the history there with Jerry West and all of that, because you could argue that's even more historic of a program and a brand, his career is going to be on how this football hire works out. Yes. It's still, WVU fans are still number one football. Even when basketball was in the Final Four, it was number one football. So this has to work out. DeVries going to the Final Four and the football program 6-6 is not going to make fans happy about Wren Baker. The conference realignment, college sports, it's all about the football program. Everything's about the football program. The donations will come in if the football program's clicking. If not, they're going to be reallocated other spots or not come in. And it's all about football, and Wren knows that. So, I think it was almost like he was willing to work with Neal for a while, certainly last year, give him one more chance. But after that game, it was like, I'm going to be sacrificing myself. Like put my neck on the line for you again when you weren't my hire. He did what he had to do. And because Neal Brown's a nice guy, he did write it that way to not throw him under the bus and make him sound good. And I'm sure I'll give a recommendation anywhere. But it had to be a firing. And it wasn't as quick as some would have wanted, and I didn't think it was going to be. Everyone thought it would Sunday morning. That was the reports out there. That just shows you they didn't really want to do this too. Like they thought about how do we word this? When do we do this? I'm sure Wren knew he had to do it when he watched that game, but it goes to show this was not a Gus Malzahn situation where the kick, triple zeros, and they're talking about, hey, we got to mutually part ways or you're going to be out of here, and let's just get that announcement gone. And he's already hired at FSU as the OC. This is a situation that was a little longer to deal with, and I do not think this decision was made a month and a half ago like some thought. I do think Saturday played a role in at least how this went down. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, WV Sports Now, as we are reacting, like all of you, to Neal Brown being fired by WVU. And we have a lot of viewers here, some in the chat, a lot of just let's go. Does seem like the fan base is re-energized. Seemed like McAfee was re-energized. Seems like pretty much everybody except for the current and maybe some former players are re-energized. We'll talk about their reaction here in a moment. Wren did not want to see the pitchforks come out. I do kind of think, Cody, off of what you're saying, as much as Wren Baker is a modern guy, he's on social media, he's great with money, that's why he's hired. He's still very young, and he's had to deal with a lot, but I do think he's been very successful so far under the circumstances at WVU. I do think there's a part of him, like any good politician, because I think he is one, that he actually does care what people think. I do think he sees social media. I do think he cares what the fans think. I do think he cares what some media members think, because I know, because he's asked some of us, including myself, what we think about things throughout the last 3 years of him being around. He may not make decisions off of what we think. I'm sure he doesn't. But I do think he cares to take the pulse of the room from media, fans, and everybody around. And he clearly took this pulse and realized it's 100% unanimous. We got to make a change. But I do think that's a factor here. There are ADs out there who flat do not care, never talk to the media, do not have any engagement with fans, and they're doing whatever, and you better hope you like it. I do think he cares. And I think this proves it on how he handled this, how he worded it. I think he cares about Neal Brown's feelings. I do think that's all part of this.
Yeah, no, yeah. And like you said it, Wren was hired to be a modern AD, and that's what he's been. And when you look, I didn't know Shane Lyons very well. I certainly didn't work with him. I think I was hired a week before he got fired.
Okay.
But he wasn't this kind of athletic director. He wasn't a super public figure out and about. And like you and I see Wren in football post-game press conferences all the time.
Comes in. Yeah, always comes in, 100%. No, I mean, Wren Baker, literally after he got hired, and I've told this story, and this is out there, and I'm sure he did this to others. After he got hired, he sent me a direct message on what was still Twitter, on X, unbeknownst to the program, saying, I was searching media members. I found you. Is this true, what you found already about me? If true, I'd like to come on your show and talk to you. Dead serious. And then I got a call from the program, and they were like, hey, we hear Wren wants to talk to you and do this. And then I was able to work with Wren, and that's how we opened the relationship. Shane Lyons sending no one any DMs. He's doing no Twitter search to find out who's what. Heather Likett Pitt, for example, a lot of people loved her. She was a great person. I was around her some. She wasn't doing that. That is a rare and odd thing. And I would imagine even people at WVU probably didn't love it, because he was setting himself up for interviews before he was even in the door. But that's Wren Baker, like that, and that's who he's still kind of been. I think you were standing in the scrum after DeVries's introductory press conference. Ethan was there too. We're all standing there, and WVU was trying to pull him, like, you have other commitments, you got to go.
Yeah.
This is a 30-minute scrum here, like, and he would brush him off, like, no, I'm going to do this as long as they need. We were out there for an hour, and there's no way he wasn't late for anything else he had to do, including with his family. But he was respecting media in that situation. That's Wren. That's why everyone likes him. Like, that's the he just is like that. So yeah, I think everything you're saying is true. I just wanted to put that out there. I mean, like, that's not a common thing. ADs do not DM media members, and we're not even talking about Tony Caridi, like other media members, and say like, hey, nice to meet you. I want to introduce myself as Wren Baker, the new AD. It's like, it should have been the other way around.
Yeah, people in the chat, there's been no media schedule for this whole week for Wren or for signing day.
Yeah, nothing's come out yet.
And they haven't even named an interim head coach. So
no, that's the next piece of
we
news.
don't even know who would talk on signing day, or
yeah.
But hopefully tomorrow morning we'll know.
Yeah, and I will say that I did check in with that early in the morning, and I already kind of knew there was going to be no pressers, but I don't think that was part of this, because I with the season ending, a bowl game presser probably would have been later, so Monday likely would have been off regardless. But yeah, Wednesday there's not even a schedule out, because like they have to, and this sucks for them because they got to figure out who's going to be in those videos, who's going to be talking, who's going to be doing that presser, who they're actually signing, if they're punning it almost. Yeah, there's a lot that unravels from this decision that I do not think people realize. I'm going to ask this as we keep unpacking things here, and maybe the chat will enjoy this. Has there been anything in now the hours since this announcement has been official from even the program, not just reports, that has surprised you? Whether it's somebody's reaction, whether it be recruits, whether it be whatever. Has there actually been a surprising development? Because I'm sure everyone thought this would be unanimous thumbs up, and that has not been the reaction.
Yeah. I'm surprised there's not an interim head coach. Like, I don't know why to put that off. It's got to be somebody. I mean,
I did think that'd be in the initial announcement, because that's an easy call. Really, it doesn't matter. None of them are going to be the permanent guy.
So that's weird. I mean, unless whoever they asked said no, which is strange.
I mean, I guess you could, if you know you're going to be fired anyway. Like, is it at all bad to have that role?
So that's been the most surprising thing. I'm not surprised. Like, everybody tweet is basically the same, saying like, wish it worked out with Neal. Neal's a great, like, everybody's saying that. Even the people that are happy that Neal's gone, everybody says he's a great guy, and it's true.
He is, yeah.
I mean, so that's so unsurprising to me that even the people that hate him, at least, are
Yeah, you had a personal situation. I mean, recently with Neal Brown. Like,
I mean, and it's
speak to that,
and when I got let go from the paper, like he has no obligation to me. Like, I'm just some guy that covers the team. He the next Monday, very publicly at the press conference, spoke highly of me, and then privately reached out and said very, very kind things to me, which, like, doesn't have to do that. Nobody would care if he didn't do that, right?
right. Other coaches, successful or not, are not doing that around the country.
And like, I know he's done that for reporters in the past that have gotten let go, and it's like that kind of stuff where fans, I think, get frustrated because the media doesn't bash Neal very often. And it's like it's hard to, when the team hasn't really bottomed out other than Iowa State and Kansas State and Texas Tech.
Yeah, I mean, they were bottomed out. Yeah, they bottomed out different times, yes.
But it is hard to, really be nasty to a guy who is kind to us, who does, take an interest in us as people, who isn't adversarial with us in the press conference. No. Maybe Mike, you a little bit.
I had one. I think there was one. The only one I think he's had his whole 6 years was with me, and I do feel like he's gonna remember me for years to come. But
so I think that is kind of weirdly the legacy Neal's gonna leave.
I think
everybody
100%.
liked him.
Yeah, I do think, and to kind of piggyback off of that, because this tenure of Neal Brown did, and maybe it was our part also with the increase of social media and everyone getting their news from there, because even though that was going on 6 years ago, it wasn't even to this level. It really is going on now. And some of that news is real, some of that news is not legit. And that's the same issue that exists in politics and sports and WVU with Neal Brown. Like it's all of that. It's all embodied that. But in addition to that, you have a program that in really any year that any of these people on social media can remember has been better than this. And separately, you also have Neal Brown being such a good guy. So I do believe, and you as well, that most of the media members who were in the room, who are seeing Neal Brown face to face, who are actually doing the job of journalism, have been fair in terms of if the team loses, they're going to say this is bad. This is not a good result. I'm unhappy here. You should be unhappy here. No one's going to try to put lipstick on a pig off of 52-15. Maybe some are, but I don't, we did not. I do believe that myself and others like me and you were fairly criticizing if needed, but the fan base clearly wanted the media member to be, which media has argued that they are in the past. Like Walter Cronkite was saying, I'm a voice for the people. The fan base was trying to scream, if you're a voice for the people want you to basically say F off.
Yes.
And we're saying we're going to be able to say 37-35 is not good enough at WVU, and you made this decision here that was poor, and you didn't make adjustments at halftime, and this game is unacceptable, etc. You got to get them up for this game when you're saying they weren't ready. That's on you. We can say all of that, and we have, but no one's going to say F you to a guy who is so nice. Like, even, I mean, again, like even when I asked him the question that went viral about having fun, I heard him. I'm sitting there right in front of him, and I'm thinking, like, this answer's trash. This is going to be bad. I got text before he even went viral saying, like, that answer he gave you is not good. I'm more mad now than I was literally 20 minutes ago. And it wasn't a leading question. It was a fair one, but I felt bad as I'm hearing it. And I felt bad when he was on ESPN. I felt bad when he was getting discussed on PTI and Around the Horn, because it's one thing for a guy to have an unsuccessful tenure or to get fired, and he probably knew it was going to end at that point too, whether the decision was made or not. But it's another thing to be dragged through the mud, which I'll be honest, that's partly why in the last 24 hours, even knowing this was likely, I was making it a point to drag some other coaches through the mud that have a similar record to Neal Brown, who were very outspoken. And, Loxley is one of them over there at Maryland in a similar program, because when you have a worse record and the national media doesn't care to discuss it, I'm going to do my best, because they're throwing all this dirt on Neal Brown, and he's 33-41. And I love Scott Van Pelt too, but he's an alum of Maryland, not WVU. He did an entire 30-minute segment on how West Virginia is disappointing him as someone who likes the program. He's never talked Maryland football on that show ever. So I do think, part of that is media feels bad, that I do think some coverage, a lot of it from the fans, and a lot of fans maybe have blogs or have content spaces that maybe they're not credentialed. I think some of that might have been unfair. I do think some of that is over the line. I don't think it's reasonable that many national outlets were spending that much energy making fun of Neal Brown and letting other people totally off the hook altogether, like Loxley I mentioned again. So I think that's part of it. Yeah, I definitely do think that's part of it. What are your thoughts on Pat McAfee's tweet that's asked here in the chat? Obviously, he's alluding to he's on the phone with somebody. He's trying to help out here. He thanked Neal like everybody else, but he believes the program should be better, can be better. All of that gave kind of a positive message to the future. But do you have any more thoughts on what he really means? Because obviously that tweet is allowing a lot of people to really run amok. And I think I did my best to read into it without trying to make it like a mockery of it. But he left room for interpretation for people to really go wild. And I don't know really what is the truth from that, obviously, unless you're talking to Pat McAfee directly.
Yeah. That's I'm kind of with you there, Mike, because it's like he wants to sound important, right? Like he wants to sound important.
To Pat McAfee, you're saying?
Yeah. Is he on the phone tonight with Wren Baker, helping him cull the list of candidates? I would doubt that.
I find it hard to
Right?
believe, but
So
who is
like,
he on the phone with? He's on the phone with somebody.
so like,
Yeah,
but that's like, for all we know, Pat McAfee's on the phone with Bruce Irvin, and he's like, "Oh, Bruce, you got to go be the D-line coach." And then Bruce gets on
right,
Twitter, he's like, "I want to be the D-line coach," right?
right,
Or he's
right.
on
Which
the phone,
happened?
right? And it's McAfee's not this, just, he's on TV, he's popular. He's not this big, powerful
He has an influence.
figure.
I
He
mean,
has he
there's
has
some
an
pushback in
influence
the
on the
chat already.
fans,
He does have
and he
influence.
has public influence. Yes.
He has public influence, of course, but yes, I do not think he's hitting the ground running and pounding the pavement. And he's donated money, but it's not like he's saying I'm going to donate $20 million and it's just a blank check to do whatever either. So
And it's the other thing. I don't know if we should talk about this. Nick Saban's not going to come here. Like, I hate to be the Debbie Downer.
yeah, right.
Pat
I don't see that,
McAfee's
yeah.
not going to talk Nick Saban into coming to WVU for 2 years.
Right. I mean,
Saban
he's
is
already
so-
retired. If this was 10 years ago and he wasn't and he didn't have the Alabama dynasty and maybe he was coming off the Dolphins, for
Yeah.
example, and it was so bad then and the Bama job wasn't open and McAfee was dealing with this situation where he's king of the media and WVU was looking for a job, then maybe. But yeah, at this point in Saban's career, when he's retired, he's having fun clearly on shows on ESPN with McAfee and Game Day. I can't see him doing that. And can you imagine, Cody? This is a negative that I don't think anybody thinks of when they bring up Saban, Jimbo Fisher, or even Rich Rod. And Rich Rod obviously has been a coach at WVU. The other two have not. They're just from West Virginia. If any of those three do take the job, and they are the head coach of WVU, certainly Rich Rod, who already has a legacy, but even Saban, even Jimbo too, and they do not win a Big 12. Like if Saban, who has all 7 national titles, comes to WVU, says, I'll do it for a couple years for free or whatever, and he's out there 6-6, that tarnishes his legacy. WVU fans are now going to think he's overrated. There's going to be people nationally that are going to say you only could win those titles when you just automatically get in the game and you couldn't do it in the playoff era. Nick Saban's in a great spot, Cody, where he can sit there and say, I have the greatest resume of all time. Yes, I never did it in the college football playoff. Not my fault. Like, I didn't have a 12-team. I had a 4-team format, but I never had a 12-team format with me. And during the 4-team format, I got in. I won. 12-team format didn't happen. When you have the what if and already a great resume, it makes your legacy even better. Because he can always say anyone who says like, okay, you're not the GOAT because you never did it in the 12-team format. He can say, I was old as hell at that point. It's not my fault you took so long to get to it. Why wouldn't I win? I was winning before. There's no one who knows. And if Rich Rod would come after what he did before and how elite that was, and he doesn't win a conference title, then people are going to be able to say, you did it in the old era, but you couldn't hack it in the new era. And now we know it didn't work out. That just hurts his legacy too. So out of all of those, obviously Rich Rod, I think would maybe be the most likely. I don't think Jimbo is either, but I know fans maybe would want him. That too, I actually would rather out of those three. But the Saban thing is a 0% non-starter. I full stop. The Saban thing is just not happening.
Yeah. And Kuz, you said he doesn't care about legacy. I mean, he does.
I think everybody does. Like 7 rings is 7 rings, but everybody does care.
And look, Saban's old. He's retired. He's been on TV. Does he like a challenge?
Saban.
Yes.
I just can't see.
He doesn't want to. Like, he willingly retired from the best job in the nation, where he was king.
Yeah.
He's not. You know.
I just don't see Saban happening at all.
Yeah.
I just do not see Saban happening.
And that's what. If we could talk about this a little bit, Mike. The one thing if I could tell every W fan one thing, it would be this: please don't get married to Jimbo or Rich Rod. Please do not marry yourself to them. And
people are married to. There are people already married.
Everybody else.
Yeah.
Because if we've learned anything from Wren Baker, he doesn't care about West Virginia connection.
He does not. No, he does not. He has never cared, and not one of his hires has been close to caring, and he doesn't have a West Virginia connection.
And he doesn't care about. He doesn't want to make the easy hire, because if we let's think about women's basketball. Mike Carey wanted the job back. He went out and said, "I want this job back. A new AD, I want it." How easy would it have been to just hire Mike Carey? He'd done it for 20 years. He's a hometown guy, and he didn't get Mike Carey. Okay, well, let's go get Kim Stevens. in-state coach, hot. Everybody wants her. Didn't do that either. Went and got Mark Kellogg. Obviously, that's worked out. Jimbo and even Rich Rod. That's like they're the names everybody comes up because they're just the most like obvious.
It makes
They're just
sense
the
to
most
come up with
obvious
the
choices.
names. I do get it
Yeah.
makes sense to come up with the names, but yes, you can't get married to that. And I hope we get a Wren presser soon, because if you remember when Wren was dealing with the Kim Stevens rumors, I tried to dance around it and basically just say, like, what would your qualifications be?
Yeah.
Because she obviously didn't have, it was a lower level success. She wasn't even in a mid-major situation at the major level. And he came around and was like, "Are you talking about Kim Stevens?" Well,
Yeah.
I don't really think she's qualified yet. That's pretty much to
Yeah.
paraphrase what he was saying. So
Yeah.
I'm sure, Cody, that if we get out there in a Wren Baker press conference in these next 2 weeks, that I'm imagining we'll have one, I'll tell you right now, fans, I'm gonna try to dance around some of these questions, and maybe Rich Rod's a candidate. Okay, I'm not dismissing Rich Rod altogether, even though I don't think either of those two are happening, but we're gonna know, because if anyone dances around it and he's not a candidate, Wren Baker will pop your balloon. He will pop your balloon.
Yeah.
Like, Wren Baker is all about popping balloons. So you get married to it, you're going to have that issue. And I do think, Kuz, what you brought up earlier about, I don't think he wants to coach in this era with Nick Saban. That's kind of what I was saying. He's obviously the greatest coach of all time if you look at the resume, but there's nothing else he can do to make that legacy better. If he comes in this era and doesn't win a championship, people then can poke holes in it and say, well, he did in the 4-team era, he did in the BCS era, but not in the 12-team era. Why do that? At his age, I don't see that being a thing that is going to happen, but yeah, and I he's going to cast a wide as hell net, that I saw somebody else say too.
So Anthony Becht is another interesting one.
Yeah, go to Anthony Becht too, because we talked to him recently at a game. He's a former player. He's coaching now, somewhat of success, but the XFL and UFL are not, major college football.
And I kind of I get the feeling, UAB tried it with Trent Dilfer, one of these spring league coaches. Trent Dilfer crashed and burned. I mean, they were the worst team in the country, right? Like the most stuck in the mud team in the country. I don't think these UFL coaches are going to get a Power 4 job when he's never coached in college. And everyone's gonna say, "Oh, he could bring his son." It's like, it could, I don't know how valuable is a couple years of Rocco Becht, but that's Anthony Becht. That would be a really, really disappointing hire for me, to just say we're gonna go get some former player who has no college experience. He's a UFL coach, which all credit to the UFL. It is what it is.
Right.
It's, that would be as disappointing a hire as they could make, from my perspective.
Yeah, and prior to these 2 years, XFL to UFL, in which the Battlehawks were a playoff team 1 year, like it's average success. It's Neal Brown-esque if you want to look at these 2 years. It's not bad, but it's not like he's winning championships and pulling off a dynasty here. He hadn't coached before that. I even jumped on his Zoom when he first got the Battlehawks job, and he was talking about, this is an incredible learning curve for me. So 2 years in, you're gonna bring in a guy who's coached 2 years, really at any level, to WVU with that kind of pressure and that historic of a program. That does seem wild. And I'll tell you right now, if it's Anthony Becht, number one, no need to rush at all. If you think he's great and you're Wren Baker, there is no need for a Monday announcement or a Friday announcement or any of those announcements in December. You sit back and relax and have a lot of beers, because no one else is hiring this man. So if you want him and he's your guy, you wait the hell out and then, figure it out. You guys can have 17 dinners, try to figure out the money as cheap as possible, bring him on, and then go ahead. I do think that would be a really underwhelming announcement, and I don't think that'll be well received. Maybe some will like it, but I don't think the donors will love that. And I'm not against former players. I'm not against WVU connections, but that would scream, if this guy was not a former WVU, this is what I hate, I guess. Any candidate for any job, if you're sitting there and saying, if he was not a former WVU player, did not have a West Virginia WVU connection, I would not want him, then to me, that's a bad hire. And Anthony Becht is someone like that. There is not a fan around that would want him if he was not a former Mountaineer based off just 2 years of coaching the XFL, UFL spring football. There was no way that a WVU fan would say your average success in spring football is what I want here at this major program. You want him, you're thinking about him because he's a former Mountaineer who's maybe the greatest tight end in program history. And he's an NFL, former NFL All-Pro and has connections there. That is the only reason why you want Anthony back. That's it.
Yeah, and you some former players do it the right way. Pat White has done it the right way, where he wants to be a coach, and he has gone out and earned it. And some former players, Stedman Bailey did this a few years ago. WVU needed a wide receivers coach, and he was like, "Oh, it should be me." And so all the fans get excited. Stedman, you're not a coach. you need to come in, be a GA, do the work, earn it. Yeah. Right? It's a power program. They can't just hire you off the street because you were good as a player.
Right.
And that's what I'm frustrated with Bruce Irvin doing the same thing. It's like, if you want to be a coach, be a coach. Like, go, and like I said, all credit to Pat White. He went out, he got some undesirable jobs doing work that he would never get credit for.
100%, a consultant.
And he moves up and up and up. Every year he's getting a better job. That's the right way. That's how you do it. All credit to Pat White. Maybe he ends up here in some capacity. That would be doing it the right way. Not these other guys that just go on Twitter and say, "Oh, I want it real bad."
You know who else did it the right way? Somebody that Neal Brown hired that's on the current staff still. Blaine Stewart did it the right way.
Blaine Stewart, 100%.
Blaine Stewart was an intern. His first job, intern with the Steelers. He moved his ass up. And then now he got a job at WVU, and he didn't get a job walking out of college because he's the son of Bill Stewart. West Virginia said, we get your father, but we're not handing positions out like it's candy here. You got to buy your time. And he built himself up as an intern and then getting other jobs. And Ryan Switzer is one that I kind of feel bad for because he had to do the same thing. He obviously didn't end up playing at WVU despite being a West Virginia kid. He was spurned. I think he was the one that I think maybe could have made some sense because he's working his way up and he has proven that he can coach. Clearly, he's now interim head coach at Tulsa, so a great opportunity for him. And maybe by doing all of that, maybe the next coach of WVU will be impressed and say, you can come aboard here. And to make something clear, to clarify to the chat here, the JA I see in the chat, I am not against anyone with a WVU connection or a West Virginia connection. I know there are some now who are claiming that conversations like this come off like there's almost a prejudice against WVU connections and West Virginia connections. That is not what I am saying at all. I am saying that it would be great if you have a WVU connection and a West Virginia connection, but I think the program should just hire the right person for the job, regardless of that connection. If that connection exists, wonderful. I'm sure Wren is not going to consider that to be a negative or hate it. He's not going to just use it as the end all be all, but he's said many times that you have to get the fishbowl atmosphere. You have to get the state. You have to get the people. You got to have a cultural fit, all of that. So if you're a West Virginia guy or WVU guy, you're going to have all of that. And that's fantastic. But to just all of a sudden, there are people out there that want the staff to look like this. Rich Rod, offensive coordinator Pat White, the defensive coordinator Bruce Irvin, Blaine Stewart gets retained, and all of a sudden he's the assistant head coach. And if there's ever a situation where Rich Rod is, breaks his leg and can't coach, then Blaine Stewart obviously is ascended. Like that dynamic is what we're talking about. That just sounds ludicrous. That every former player, former coach, all these connections, it just cannot be all of that and only that. There are people. I had comments on the site. Somebody said off the Kodo Nicky report, if it's him, I'm never going to a game again. It better be a West Virginia connection. That's just insane. That is insane stuff. And a West Virginia connection has left the program before, left you in the dust. A non-West Virginia connection has won at the program before. Okay? I mean, they've had non-West Virginia connections win. They've had West Virginia connections, again, obviously worked out in basketball. But it's worked both ways. It's not like it has to be a West Virginia connection. And Kuz, you're right. If the guy wins, that's it. When Dana Holgerson won the Orange Bowl with no connection, drunk all the time, basically saying inappropriate things and not that friendly to the media, but he won the Orange Bowl over Clemson, everybody said, love this man.
How many people would have invited Darren DeVries to their Thanksgiving on Thursday after beating Gonzaga? right? That's winning's all that matters. Like,
Yeah, and Don Nalen didn't have a West Virginia connection. Again, Coos. Yeah,
there.
Don Nalen, greatest coach in program history, did not have a West Virginia connection, and he is beloved right now. That is exactly what I'm saying. It is not a requirement to have a West Virginia connection or a WVU connection. 100%. It is not a requirement. If you have it, great. And I do think maybe a perfect staff, which is, you could have it, which is maybe what Neal was trying to put together. You have, if hypothetically, if you bring in Koto Nicki and then he's not been a head coach and he has no connection, maybe he sits there and says, I'll retain Blaine Stewart. He's a great recruiter. He has a connection here. He'll show me the geography. Maybe he brings in Pat White, who, as you're saying, has worked his ass on the way up. So maybe he's ready to be a quarterback's coach, if not even an OC yet, because that ingratiates yourself to the fans.
Yes.
That would be positive. That would make sense. But to sit there and say this got to be, Rich Rod, Pat White, Bruce Irvin, or I'm pissed.
Yeah.
That's unreasonable. That's unreasonable, period.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about. Don't get married to it. Because it's also unfair whoever they end up hiring.
Yeah. Yes,
right?
it is.
It's like, oh, you're not Jimbo Fisher. You're not Rich Rod. And it's like, that like, I don't know. It's just, it's such a silly thing.
If that person doesn't win right away, that's what's going to be
Yeah.
said. 100%. They should have brought Rich Rod in if that person doesn't win right away.
Yeah. And it's just, and I think the West Virginia thing, Jimbo was not good at Texas A&M.
No, with a lot of resources. A lot
has
of resources.
more money than God. he was not good there. And it wasn't
a lot of resources. Yeah.
It wasn't, oh, he's mediocre, but he's in the top half of the SEC. No, he was bad. And the same with, like, I'm not old enough, I guess, but, like, I don't understand why so many people still want Rich Rod when it's like he left, right? Like he didn't want to be here and he went to Michigan.
Well, not only that, because I was a student then. I mean, I'm older than you. Like I know, and it would be kind of cool for me. It would almost be a full circle. I dealt with that as a student, kind of came in the end of that stain, and then to cover it professionally. I'm not against it. I think it'd be cool as hell, to be honest with you. But from that regard, yeah, there's part of that too. So I get any fans that be upset because there's a lot of dirt there that I've heard that it wasn't just like he took what was thought to be a better job. There's a lot of dirt that happened there that I have heard from people, and I don't even think all of it's ever been reported. A lot of dirt that's there. But I do wish at some point he could come back and be celebrated, and I'm happy that he's having success right now in Jacksonville State. But Cody, I think of any mic drop I've ever had in my entire life, I mic dropped the Rich Rod argument on in my recent commentary because I dismissed even what you're saying. It's valid to have that personal issue. Yeah. I don't have it. And then I went in on, it's not about personal. He's had 1 10-win season since he left. West Virginia's had the same amount. He's had, 1 conference title run, and it was off a division title that doesn't exist now in the Big 12. That was at Arizona in the 1 year. Failed at Michigan, whether you want to blame it on them or not. Not great success at Arizona after that 1 year. It definitely dropped off. He usually needs a year or two to get going. And Jacksonville State, yes, he's winning. It took him a while to get that job, but that is a group of 5 with an easier schedule. And he just actually is coming off a loss as we're speaking. Yes, he could win a conference title there, which would be cool for him. But does that translate that he is automatically going to have success in the Big 12, in the 12-team format, in this situation at his age? That is not a guarantee at all. It is just as likely that it doesn't work out with him as it could work out with him, and it has nothing to do with personal. Jimbo at least has a recent ride in the power level, does have a national title from the power level, even though it's a previous era. I don't think Jimbo's a guarantee either because the Texas A&M thing kind of does cancel out the Florida State success, but Rich Rod has just not, if he has not been this successful anywhere else but at WVU in terms of that elite level of success, that gives me pause to wonder, why are you telling me this is a lock that everyone is just going to be popping champagne for Rich Rod? Like, it was 3 wins his first year at WVU. You might need a year like that again. Do you want to endure that again? Do you want to experience losing a group of 5 loss to Ohio in week 2 because you're dealing with him having no recruiting base? Do you want that right away? Like, that could happen to him just the same as it could happen to anybody else. So
Mike,
that's the thing with Rich Rod too. It's not even personal.
you mentioned his age, and I've made notes on this because I figured we were going to talk about it. Next year, Jimbo would be 60, Rich Rod would be 62. The coaches in the Big 12 championship, Matt Campbell's 45, Kenny Dillingham's 34.
34.
The coaches that were in contention for the Big 12, Kalani Sitake at BYU, 49, Dave Aranda at Baylor, 48, Dion and Chris Kleiman are 57. This isn't the old Big 12 with Bob Stoops and Gary Patterson and Bill Snyder
Right.
and Mac Brown at Texas. Like, the other teams in the league have young, up-and-coming head coaches. I mean, look at Dave Aranda. I thought he was dead in the water after last year. I thought he was dead in the water after the first month of this season. He turned it around. He's a young guy that gets this modern era of football and is doing it. And I don't understand why people are so quick to just say, let's retread some old coaches who had success years ago.
Yeah, Bob Stoops. Yeah. Like, I'm surprised. I got to be honest. I'm surprised Bob Stoops is not brought up because you want to talk spring football, Cody. He was coaching spring football not long ago. He's made it clear that maybe he would be okay with coaching and not fully done. Like, I'm surprised he's not. Mac Brown just said a week ago, I do not want to retire. And North Carolina said, well, you're gonna. And I'm not surprised that he could be thrown out there because he clearly wants to coach some football and he has won a national title. So that's good on the resume. Like, I'm surprised these guys aren't being brought up. And you know why they're not being brought up? There's not a West Virginia connection. It's a similar resume, but the West Virginia connection is why Jimbo's being brought up. And yes, that maybe could lure him in, but there's no other school rumored for Jimbo either. So yeah, I mean, I'll ask out of Rich Rod, Jimbo, and maybe Anthony Beck, like any connection, who would you be the most okay with?
So
we've been talking about.
Yeah, he made a great case for Rich Rod of like, he didn't have a good time at Michigan. He didn't have a great time at Arizona, right?
One good year at Arizona.
I mean, his record after he left WVU isn't good.
No, not good.
In great success at Jacksonville State. Happy for him. Like, you wrote a story when he got bowl eligible and people got mad at you, like, why are you bringing him up? But like, good for a local guy going out and still getting it done. Out of those three, Mike, Jimbo would be the only one where I'm like, all right, let's see if this guy has some juice.
Yeah, because I do think, and I know some believe this about Rich Rod, and I'm not saying that he wouldn't get some excited. And I know Ken Kendrick, for example, is one. And talking about influence, obviously he has some. His name's in the baseball stadium. He was very involved in the Huggins situation. He's very involved. I know. I hear you very much. So he would be in. But in terms of others, I think Jimbo would also generate some buzz amongst the donors. I do think Jimbo would bring some cachet. And somebody asking, who do you think can recruit players to come to WVU? This is not a situation like it would have been 30 years ago. Number one, you can't and you don't just live in West Virginia. Your recruiting base is well beyond that. West Virginia does have history there. They do get on national TV a lot. You are in a Power 4 conference. It is still a program that is known worldwide. There's a rabid fan base that we're speaking to now that is all over social media, that is more evident. YouTubers like Kuz, there's not many programs that are bringing that level of energy, producing that type of content, and making the fan base what it is. You have the loudest mouthpiece around, who's an alum in Pat McAfee. It's not a bad program to be at. Like, you can, if you're a player and you can go to Ohio State, you're going to do that probably. But if you can play, but you can attract players to want to play at WVU. Absolutely, it can happen. And I think Jimbo maybe would bring some juice in that regard. But as you put it, there's also an interest maybe of wanting to go freaking younger. Because if you go Jimbo, if you go Rich Rod, if you go any of those guys who are older, you're doing this again in 3 or 4 years. Certainly Saban, who I didn't even mention in the group because that's just a non-starter for me. I don't think it's going to happen. But he obviously wouldn't do this long term. You want a guy that has some level of experience, that is some type of track record that shows you he can do this. That I do think it's important to fit in culturally. Like Neal Brown, Kentucky, he fit in culturally. That's why everyone loved it at the time. You don't got to be a WVU guy, but I do think it's important to fit in culturally. I think Darren DeVries fits in culturally, even though he's not from the region. His vibe is very much West Virginia. He's very laid back, and I do think he fits in culturally. And yeah, Ryan Day, the whole thing, I don't think that fits either, even though, yes, he's winning there, even though he's not good enough for them. I don't know if that fits either. But that age, I think, is important. That's why Neal Brown was a popular hire 6 years ago, because of his age, because of his cultural fit, because of a lot of that, what he did at the Group of Five level. That, I think, is more important than having the connection or anything else that we're bringing up, or being, 65 years old already with some wins on your resume. And I think those are the things that Wren Baker is going to be looking at. Like, I'm telling you, Wren Baker is not going to marry himself to connections. Wren Baker is not going to marry himself to only one or two names. That's why I spoke out earlier today and was like, anybody who thinks that everything is just in the books for certain guys, that's wild. Wren Baker is going to do a national search, and he's going to take his time, and he realizes this decision is his career too. So I don't think there's going to be a knee-jerk thing. You can make calls. If you want to make a call to Urban Meyer, you want to make a call to Nick Saban. Urban Meyer's younger, at least. He's younger, at least. But if you want, and that's not happening either. But if you want to make a call to Nick
Saban, with Rocky recent,
well, that's true. Yeah. If you want to make a call to Jimbo, you make all these calls.
Yeah.
Guys, and I'm also sure Wren Baker is doing his due diligence. He's making these calls. He may have already made these calls. I am sure that if nothing else, he even said this with basketball, Cody. He admitted that Dusty May pretty much told him, I'm in the running for, I think, better jobs. I'm not coming to you. But Wren then said, it's fine. I agree. What is your opinion? And then he'll get the opinion. So I'm sure he probably has called Jimbo. And he probably, I'll tell you this, I bet as we're speaking, there's already a decision one way or another on Jimbo. I bet you Jimbo's already given an answer. I bet they've already called Jimbo, and if Jimbo is not coming, Jimbo has already made it clear, I'm not coming. Or I don't think they're sitting there for 3 weeks trying to convince Jimbo and all their eggs are in the Jimbo basket. I think Wren's doing his due diligence in a national search and casting that net. That is the point.
Mike, you had a great line a little bit ago. You said WVU can attract recruits. And here's something to keep in mind. WVU can attract coaches.
Right.
It's a good job. They're not desperate. And that's why
it's a good job. It is not. It's a good job.
I get so confused why people are like, they're clinging on to Jimbo in Rich Rod. And it's like they're not desperate. Like, people are going to apply to this job. Good, strong candidates are going to apply to this job and want to come here and want to coach the Mountaineers, and they're going to want to work with Wren Baker.
We saw it with basketball.
We saw it with basketball. I was just going to say that, Mike. Look at the women's basketball. That job, the women's basketball job, hadn't been open for 20 years.
Oh, I meant the men's job, but you could say the women's too. Yeah.
And they got, Wren Baker said it's the most candidates he's ever gotten for a job. And you're going to say, well, he was at North Texas. Okay. Still.
And the women, and you know what adds to this too, Cody? The women's basketball job, I think we all would agree, in terms of history and brand, is not near the level of the football or men's basketball job.
Doesn't touch it.
Right, doesn't even touch it. You're talking about a Sweet 16 at the most. The other jobs are they've experienced greater days. And Mike Carey was a fine coach for a while, but it was definitely dragging at the end. He was never giving you even a flirtation with winning a national title there, even when he went to a Sweet 16 way early on. The other jobs, they've certainly done that. But with that said, there still was a lot of interest, and a lot of coaches, legit coaches, did want that job. And the men's job is another one. If you remember,
yes,
if we're sitting there a year ago, and this is after the Huggins drama, this is after a year of interim Eilert, which is arguably the worst season in program history, certainly the worst or second worst, and everyone knew this was going to happen, and he was forced into kind of keeping Eilert and doing the interim thing because that was bad timing. And it was a year-long search, really, for everybody. A lot of the naysayers were out there saying the job's overrated. Yeah, there's 31 NCAA tournament appearances, but the Final Four is 15 years ago. It's never going to be what it is. It's a poor state, NIL. All those things were said. You're not going to find anybody who wants this job. And then they're throwing out all these names like, oh, Dusty May's not going to want this job. Darren DeVries isn't going to want this job. This coach is going to want this job. And then one of those names you said wouldn't want the job ends up getting the damn job, like ends up taking the job because it's not a bad job. And if you look at the options, even right now, football wise, in terms of major jobs, because I even had somebody text me after I threw out the Koronecki report. Well, I know I believe you, Mike, but I know he's also a candidate at UNC. And why wouldn't you want the UNC job over WVU right now? And my response was, I can easily argue why you'd rather have the WVU job. Number one, it's a wide open Big 12. Wide open Big 12. You don't have a top dog in that thing right now, which means it can be you off of history and if you start winning. Number two, you have tons of history there that if we're talking football and not basketball, it's better at WVU than it is at North Carolina. You have everything I articulated before of the rabid fan base, McAfee, all of that. And Country Road Trust is a revolutionary NIL company. They got a damn restaurant. Well, like, that's not the case everywhere in the country. They were doing the beer before anybody else. There are national TV exposure. Like, again, there are reasons why you'd even want the WVU job over the North Carolina job. Okay, there are. So jobs that are open right now, there's absolutely a reason to want that job. It's not like they just cannot find anybody who would want it. And, oh, man, anybody who would come and take it, we're going to give you whatever because we're just groveling at the feet of certain guys. No. Like Anthony Beck would be a situation where nobody else, you're just giving it to whoever because you can't hire somebody. You can get a solid hire now that you have time. You're going through December. This is important to Wren Baker. You can argue UNC is a better job, but I also can argue WVU is a better job. I do not think this is some slam dunk that we're not talking Clemson here. We're not talking, even Florida State off of the bad year they're having in terms of that brand. We're talking North Carolina that is generally speaking an average program. Okay.
And it's a basketball school.
It's a basketball school. The number one money is going to go to basketball. The number one money for football, if it's winning and if there's interest, would go football. 100%. WVU's a football school over basketball.
That's Michael in the chat. I absolutely think West Virginia is the best job that's open right now. I mean, who are the other? Purdue's open. I mean,
Purdue's open. North Carolina is the argument. North Carolina's open.
But like Purdue's a program.
There's a group of five that are open.
They're going to be desperate.
Yeah.
West Virginia's not desperate for coaches, and they're not going to be. And that's why I don't. Everybody's I don't know, nervous or something. Maybe it's just because. Like you said, Mike, they haven't fired a coach in 40 years. Nobody knows how to act.
Yeah. And honestly, I'll even say this too, Chris and Kuz. If I concede and say that North Carolina might be a better job because the ACC has maybe more elite teams, they've proven to be a little bit more respected this year, and maybe you think the money is more plentiful there, sure. Then do we agree West Virginia is the second best job available right now? Like, there's only a couple major jobs that have history and have some prestige there. If you think it's the second best job, maybe UCF. But, like, you know what I'm saying? There's not that many of these. UCF was a group of five a couple years ago. They've not had any success on this Big 12 level, and the national title they have up there is fraudulent as ever. So if that's all we're here, yes, Orlando, there's money. But even if I give you UCF, then it's the third best. It's certainly better than Purdue. We got that, right? Like, UCF is a good job. No, UCF is a good job. But my point of it is West Virginia is not this bad job.
UCF didn't even fire Malzahn. He left. That's true. It's like,
that's true.
I don't know.
It is a good job. No, that is a good job. I would want it. I'd want to live there in that media market, that coverage base, and that money. It is a good job. You get Disney involved to start funding you. Like, that is a good job, 100%. But there aren't that many major jobs with history and some prestige that are available. You're not going to say, if you're a major coach, I'd rather coach a group of five than West Virginia. You're not going to say, I just don't want the West Virginia job because it didn't work out with Neal Brown, so I wouldn't take it under any circumstances. The West Virginia job is still a good job. Maybe you want UNC or UCF over West Virginia, but there are not that many of these available. And all the coaches you're mentioning there, you're giving me about 10 of them, and you're telling me that it's third best job. You're going to still get some good options in there. That's all I'm trying to say, that these dark cloud social media posts of they're never going to win, it's the worst job in the country, the Neal Brown era ruined life in West Virginia, and then it just goes on and on with this dark cloud of misery that people put up there. That, number one, doesn't help anything. And number two, I don't think it's even true. I think a lot of that's exaggerated and it's very melodramatic. 100%.
Yeah, and let's talk. Who the top G5 guy is probably Barry Odom.
Yeah.
And let's thought experiment. Would there be any reason for him to say, "Oh, I don't want to interview at West Virginia"?
No, he's 100% going to want to interview.
Yeah. So
100%. Is there any reason why Kotelnicki would not interview?
yeah,
100%. He would definitely interview. Is there any
Well,
reason why is there any reason why Jimbo, Rich Rod, any of these guys that you do want, like they're going to interview if they want a new job? Like there's no reason why any of these guys would say, no, I refuse to interview at WVU. It's beneath
yeah.
me.
I
No
think
way.
it's a good sign. Kotelnicki's one of the hottest coordinators in this cycle.
Yeah.
Tonight, the night they fired Neal, it's confirmed he's going to interview.
And I can confirm that from non-WVU sources, but I think it's pretty clear. I don't think anyone can doubt that would you say it's fair to say that out of people who legitimately cover WVU, I might be the most tapped into Penn State and what they're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I mean, come on. Like, yeah. So like, and just look at that. Look at the reaction. They're freaking out. That's. And I can see arguments against it, Cody. If he's not, and I do say the one pushback that I'll even give to my report that I think is legit, that would go against the grain of Wren Baker. That is what I have had. That is legit. Wren Baker has publicly said he does prefer people that have been a head coach versus the hot coordinator, and that would be hiring the hot coordinator. But it doesn't mean that Wren Baker is not willing to adjust. Doesn't mean he's not willing to talk. And I didn't report that he has the job like some are acting.
Yeah.
He's going to interview. He's one of the candidates. Wren Baker is very willing to hear from all of these people. I'm sure he wants to sit there and hear from the genius offensive mind who resurrected Jalen Daniels, and Jalen Daniels hasn't been nearly as good without him and made Penn State into a 10-win boring team to a really exciting national title contender. Like, he's a big part of that. That's why the Penn State fan base is so upset about this.
That's why, Drew Eller's taken a big step this year.
Yeah,
100%. And that's
100%.
Yeah, the only guy, the Georgia's defensive coordinator, Glenn Schumann, I think that's the name. He's getting tossed around a lot. Yeah. He's the only guy where like he could probably have any job he wants. Right?
Yeah, when you're at Georgia, when you're winning like that,
one, maybe he's like, oh, I don't want to interview at WVU because XYZ is going to open up, and I know I'll get that, right? Like, yeah. But even then, he probably would interview.
Yeah. Cody Nespor, by the way, Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, for anyone just tuning in here, we're reacting to the Neal Brown news, and obviously this is going off the rails, talking about the future of the Mountaineer program as well. I don't want to make this a 3-hour show. We have been here for an hour. I do love the chat activity, and I thought this would rev up, and we get a lot of engagement for this, which is why I want to do this tonight. I do want to ask you, kind of off of what you're saying there, obviously Kotelnicki would be an offensive-minded guy. Obviously, Rich Rod would even be an offensive-minded guy and would come with a lot of his people. Jimbo's offense at Florida State was great when Jameis Winston was there, not so much at Texas A&M, so you're not really sure what you're getting there. If you go the Georgia route, if you go that assistant route, and you're not worrying about the head coaching resume, you're looking at defense. Do you believe the program should have a mindset of Neal Brown was an offensive coordinator, it didn't work out. Dana was an OC, it worked out for a while, but then it ended. Do you think the program should want an offensive-minded coach for today's college football, or should they go the defensive-minded route? Because that, again, would be the pushback to the Kotelnicki report, that is the exact opposite of there are some fans who think they should go defensive-minded after back-to-back offensive coaches ended in a negative situation.
The only issue,
and it's been a long damn time, Jared. You're correct. Yeah, it's been all offensive coaches.
The only problem is there always just seems to be so many more offensive candidates. Like, off the top of my head, who would the top like defensive minded candidate be?
I mean, you probably named Georgia. You named him. That's it.
Yeah, right? Georgia's DC.
I mean, if you want to do
Summerall a defense guy, I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, the other one, which we're going to say here, because obviously the West Virginia connection, people would scream, Gibson would be one.
Tony Gibson,
he's in rumors for other jobs. Like, that is one that he's worked his way up. I could maybe see that as more of a connection fit because he has worked his way up and earned the situation, but that would be a defensive situation. Yeah.
And like Tony Gibson's interesting to me because, Mike, you said a while ago, what if they hire a guy with no connections and maybe they just want a guy on staff? Like, if Tony Gibson isn't going to get a head coach job, would he maybe want to come back and be DC again?
Right.
Like that would be interesting. I think he's had a decent little run since he left, and
Okay, Kuz. Yeah, Odom being a defensive guy.
Odom. Well, there you go. He's like I believe the top
Then he would be the
G5
top.
candidate.
Yeah.
So, sitting here today, he'd probably be my top pick. So sure, why not get a defensive minded head coach? And it's not I think the big thing is this isn't the Big 12 of 12 years ago where it's everybody score 50 points and see who wins.
That's, I think, why some maybe would want a defensive coach, because the
Yeah.
thing also is that, yes, you would think, and as Jared brought up, the program always goes to the offensive sexy coach, whether it be someone like Dana, who was the hot coordinator at that time, or somebody who maybe is working his way up with a West Virginia connection, like, say, Rich Rod was. But the Big 12 is different than it was in the past, as you're bringing up. And the options are either try to outscore everybody like Dion, or, and yeah, they recently played better defense, or have just a solid coach that can. The problem with West Virginia this year and in 2022, the two real bad years for Neal Brown, the 2 years that almost got him fired in 2022 and then did get him fired in 2024, the biggest problem was defense, right? Green made a lot of mistakes. The offense was not good enough at times. I agree. But the secondary was so bad that you didn't even have a chance in some games, and that's why they blew the brawl, is because of the secondary. You have a better secondary. You're holding on to that win, and maybe Brown's back if you win that damn game. That might have changed the whole dynamic of the vibes. With that said, maybe that's why you look on the defensive side, and maybe Gibson wouldn't come unless it's for the head coaching job, and maybe he thinks that'll be a lateral move, but it also depends, because it depends on who's the head coach, depends on the situation. Is he really going to get a head coaching job elsewhere? If he's not getting a head coaching job elsewhere, maybe he then just would, or maybe he doesn't. Who knows? But maybe that would be why you'd want to go defensive minded, because the defense has been such a problem. Like, when's the last time they've had a great defense to be able to win big? That might have been early Dana at the best, and that's not really a great D. That's maybe why people also love the Rich Rod era, because you had offense and defense during that time frame.
Yeah, and when you bring up recruiting, you talk about the OC at Oregon or Cal's coach.
Yeah,
those guys have never recruited on this side of the country. Like, that's a pretty big jump, where I don't even know if coaches want to make that jump.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the volleyball coach didn't mind, but it's different in football. You're recruiting nationally. I could maybe get not worrying about it. And again, I'm banging the drum. I don't care about the West Virginia connection. I do think a cultural thing is part of this, and it is harder to recruit in this area if you've never been to this area, because it will then teach him to make it clear that, hey, you can't live in West Virginia. You got to go to the Whippeal. And like, Rodney Gallagher was considered as a local recruit, and he's not even in the state. You got to get somebody to really get that in terms of recruiting, which is still being done now. So that's something to bring up. Someone I do want to get here before we go that is a West Virginia connection, but not a WVU connection, that also was previously a hot assistant that's coaching in the state now and could win a conference title now. And that is Charles Huff, who was almost fired a year ago and now is the toast of the town, toast of the state, and maybe could win Marshall a conference championship. Sun Belt is not the Big 12. Conference USA that it was before is not the Big 12. Group of 5 is not the Big 12. Just ask Cincinnati and just ask UCF. Their runs they had as success as Group of 5s are way harder to deal with now, but he is having success with a lot less money, even though you think West Virginia is not rich. Is that in any way someone that you would consider, would be interested in if you're Wren Baker? And do you believe he could be a legit candidate for WVU?
Huff just feels weird to me, because I mean, his Marshall tenure has been so strange. It's been so up and down.
Like, strange. Yeah.
I mean, he's been good. I wouldn't argue he hasn't been good at Marshall, but he has weird flubs all the time, and the team goes through periods where they're like they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, and then that year didn't really become a great year.
That could have been something of a special year,
and it's
right?
like this year, they started out and there was nothing going, and then you switch quarterbacks and they have this great run. And I don't know. Huff is just I like him watching him from afar. He's kind of weird.
It'd be lit press conferences. I think I'd have some fun
Oh
covering him.
yeah, he's a fun press conference guy.
No. Again, yeah, he's had 2 9-win seasons in the last 3 years. That's true.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what you're not bringing up there, BPA? Your sandwich in between the middle one was a 6 and 7 year. So my thing is, and maybe this, you don't have the luxury of this. I said this to a colleague of ours coming to WVU now, who has previously covered Marshall, and I think wants it for the connections that he would have and automatically kind of be the most tapped in probably, is I would prefer Huff to prove this to me one more damn time. Like, I would rather see Huff go back-to-back years of contending for a conference title in a Group of 5 conference, whatever it is, and then we can start talking about programs like WVU. For me, that's my perfect world. I'd like to see him do it again, because we've seen him do it once, and then you know what happened after he did it one time with that 9-win season you're bringing up there, BPA? The next year was a Neal Brown train wreck, where not only were they losing games, he was in viral press conferences week after week. I got a lot of clicks here in WVSN because I was writing stories about it when nobody else is covering WU would, since we cover the region. And
he threw the fans under the bus.
He threw the fans under the bus.
He was weird about the quarterback.
Yeah, if you didn't like the Neal Brown fun comment, he's literally attacking you as fans. He threw the quarterback under the bus. Him and the other players are going at it. I know players there didn't love playing for him at times. And yes, he was on the hook for his job. And yes, he fought back. He kept that locker room. He got a lot of those players to then still buy in. He did switch QBs. And right now they're looking at 9 wins again and a conference championship, which a conference title is a conference damn title. Ask West Virginia. They talk about 15 conference titles. Not all of them were back in the major conference days, but there's still 15 of them. So yeah, that's cool for him. He's doing that. I'd like to see it again, because what convinces me that next year he's not going to say something else stupid, stick his foot in his mouth again, and if you lose players, he's going to complain about, like, he's been an adversary of the fans and the NIL at Marshall.
Yep.
And I will confirm this. If he stands there in a press conference and attacks Country Road Trusts, they are not going to love it at all. And they are not going to bend and do whatever he wants, like happened at Marshall, where they were like, okay, you're the big boy coach, so we'll do whatever, and we will no longer talk about you, and you can keep saying whatever about me. That is not going to be the case if he thinks he's going to have the luck just throwing his weight around off of being an assistant at Bama and then this mediocre up and down Marshall tenure. I don't think that'll re-energize the fans either at WVU. I think they'll think you're getting Marshall scraps at WVU. I just don't see that as being an energizing. I don't think that's someone Pat McAfee's going to be thrilled about if you care about what he thinks.
And it's so, Huff has had such a weird tenure at Marshall, where after that first really good season, it was like everybody was just like, oh, done deal, he's gone, somebody's going to hire him. And Marshall was upset because the way his contract worked out, I think they were only going to get, it was like $800,000 if somebody bought out his contract. And then they had a bad year, and it was like, now we're going from like we're not going to get any money, somebody's going to hire him, to now, now we're on the hook with his contract.
Yeah.
And now we're back like, he's having to publicly dismiss rumors that he's getting hired away. So it's just, look, I've never met Charles.
But also, Cody,
he seems fine. He's had a good tenure. It's just weird. Like, there's stuff that's happened with him that I don't think you want to invite into bed with you.
No, 100%. And also, because anyone who wants to bring up, oh, well, he's now an attractive commodity because other coaches, other programs are calling him. Group of 5 programs are calling him. It's not
other Miss.
North Carolina and Purdue are the other major programs open. UCF, they're not calling Huff. Like, I mean, and yes, he sent players to the NFL, but saying he sent more players to I think this is another problem. We're putting the bar of every coach that can be candidate to the Neal Brown level. If we all agree that Neal Brown's tenure has not been successful and was not successful and is a dark period, it's the worst 6-year stretch in 50 years for the program, one of the worst ever, I believe the second worst if you look at win percentage, then, to say a guy has had a better success rate at certain things than Neal Brown at WVU, is that enough to make him the guy? Like, I just think this job can be more attractive to more people than some of the fans are acting like it can.
Yes.
And I could see if you hear 15 no's, Like, Kuz is right. You got to do your due diligence and call these people whether you like it or not. Sure. If you get a no all down that list and you're deciding then, okay, Huff, Anthony Beck, like at that point, all right, I can have the conversation. But we are not, I mean, that got to be like January 3rd at that point. Like it cannot be December 1st where he's somebody's top guy. That just screams selling yourself short when there are other options there. And I would rather have Kotelnicki than Huff. And I know Huff's been a head coach and Kotelnicki's not. And maybe that's a thing, but maybe that's a problem for Wren. But I also do think Wren Baker might not, I do think he might also factor in a little bit on how things will be received. And let's just face facts here. The reason why there's really not a football rivalry between West Virginia and Marshall, even though there is in other sports, is because West Virginia is a power program and Marshall is not. And that's just the case. And if you are hiring a coach where you're plucking from your little brother that you won't even play, well, how does that look?
Yeah.
How does that look? Like, perception is reality. I'm not saying that if he's lighting it up that you would ignore him, but how does that look? He's not lighting it up. He's had a couple good years on an easy schedule. If he's undefeated, okay. But how does that look? Like, the perception of that is, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
They're not noteworthy enough of a program that will schedule them, but we will take their head coach.
Right. Like, how does that?
Like, imagine if Penn State poached Pat Narduzzi.
Right. Like, if the Penn State job was open, if Franklin would take another job, he would go to Bama for some reason, and that job is open, they're not even considering Narduzzi because they just wouldn't want that. They're not going to take Pitt's coach and put him on Penn State. It just wouldn't happen. Maybe the reverse, but it wouldn't consider that either. Yeah, how would that look? Bama's D's were good. See, then it brings it back to what we were saying before. Do you want an offensive coach or do you want a defensive coach? There are people that prefer the defensive coach, which is why Huff's name would maybe get more steam. But the program has notoriously hired offensive coaches, as Jared brought up earlier. And an offensive coach is generally the younger guy, is generally the hot guy in terms of the hot commodity. And generally that feels like more of a Wren Baker thing to go the offensive route. We'll see. If you want to go pure defense, then maybe that does give more credence to Huff.
Yeah, I do think the thing with a defensive coach, like if you look at a guy like Mike Gundy, the thing when you get a defensive coach is you have to hire good OCs constantly because good OCs get hired away constantly.
Yeah, if you have a deep,
like
100%.
Gundy churns offensive coordinators.
Yeah,
because they get hired away to jobs. And so that's the one thing of like, if you get a defensive guy, you got to nail the very first OC pick.
And then the second one you're hiring again. Because like if you nailed the first OC pick, Cody, and then you all of a sudden contended for the Big 12 title because you can quickly turn this around in today's college football, that guy's gone. So then you got to do it again and again and again. And yeah, that's harder. Because the staff's more important probably with a defensive guy.
Yeah.
100%.
But that's not me saying, oh, you can't get a defensive coach. That's just that's the reality of what a defensive head coach is like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, the Vic Koenig situation there, some bring up as the end of the West Virginia's defense there. I think we might have lost Cody for a brief moment. Now we got him back. Yeah, that's what Kuz brought up. I mean, that's really that. At one point, that was a top 5 defense, absolutely, under Brown, but then not in recent memory. And some recruits like Beanie Bishop worked out, but the recent ones did not. Garnet Hollis did not, and did not. And you're left with this. So I think one thing is safe, that I would imagine Wren Baker is going to take, a week, 2 weeks. Like, he's not coming out there tomorrow and saying, Odom has this job. He's made calls. I'm sure he's making calls as we're speaking. I'm sure he's not sleeping and always making calls. I'm sure he's churning numbers. He's crashing spreadsheets. It's what Wren Baker does. I'll break some news for everybody. Wren Baker secretly likes the national coaching search thing. This is like Wren Baker's heaven. He likes this.
Yeah.
Like, he's already made spreadsheets. And everything we're saying on this show, Wren Baker has spreadsheeted to death. And he might even secretly listen to things like this. He's probably listening to what Keenan Cummins is saying. He's probably listening to what Kazaz is saying. He does absorb and he does take in information, and it is smart to do that. He might be listening to Kuz's Corner, and that's a serious thing. I know he appeared on some of the fan shows. It's another tip of the cap for Wren Baker. For him to appear with Kuz, for him to appear with Mountaineer Paul and those guys, that's cool. I think it's cool that Wren Baker does that thing, does that stuff. That a lot of ADs are not doing that. That is why you should want this to work out with Wren Baker, so you can keep on doing that. Having him go on a show, I'm not saying you guys are doing this, but having him go on a show and then go on Twitter an hour later and say, I'm out on Wren Baker, that's not, that doesn't even make any sense. So yeah. I do think that Wren Baker is taking it all in, but I also don't think he's knee jerk. I don't think I don't think he thinks he has to be quick right now, unless he really believes his number one guy is going to be nabbed up. And I do think there's pros and cons of everyone we mentioned, that if he loses his number one guy, he can go down and still get another great coach. I don't think he has to worry about Purdue, for example. And building the staff's important, and recruiting's important, and all of that's important. You don't want to have this take forever. You can turn this around quickly, but we'll see.
Mike, can I give an anecdote, Mike?
Go ahead.
So I just rewatched, for a story that's going to come out in the morning, I just rewatched Mark Kellogg's introductory press conference.
Okay.
And it's funny, Kellogg was a guy that Wren knows, had hired before at a different school.
Yeah.
And in his press conference, somebody asked Kellogg, like, what was the interview process like? And he was like, from my perspective, it was really long.
Yes, so and he probably was thinking, like, why was it so long? I know this man. Right.
So even with the guy that Wren knows and has hired to a job before, it's not quick. I also read during the press conference, Wren joked he locked the search committee in rooms for 6 hours just to go through, like, candidates. So, like, this isn't happening. Like Mike, you said, ain't happening tomorrow. Probably ain't happening by the end of this week.
Yeah, because I'm not going to say who, but I got a text message from somebody after the Kotelnicki report who said, do I need to have you on a show tomorrow? How quickly is this moving? And I'm like, it's not going to be announced tomorrow. Like, I'll come on, but, like, it's not going to be announced tomorrow. It's just not going to be announced tomorrow. And I'll give you this. If it is announced tomorrow, that's wrong. I don't think that's a good decision then. If it's announced tomorrow, I am more than happy to pen a commentary on how that is stupid. And I don't think Wren Baker is stupid, and he's not going to do stupid things, but there is no reason to rush a hire for one of, and I believe the top major jobs available right now in an important cycle, an important job for you. If you hire the guy tomorrow and it doesn't work out in year 1 or 2, you're in more trouble than if you wait a little while and at least give the vibe that you're doing your due diligence, which we know he's going to do. And he did it with every other damn sport. So the most shocking result was they didn't do it in baseball when they were top 10. And he's just like, I'll do your ascending thing.
Well, he had to get talked into that. I remember.
I know. Yeah. We talked about that. He had to get
really had to hammer him for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Even Eiler did joke about it. I mean, Eiler had to go. Eiler was having the interview, and at that point, there was no other option. Like, can you imagine if Eiler failed the interview? He would have basically just been like, "I guess I'm going to coach," because obviously there's no time to do anything here. Like, he put Eiler through the ringer, and there was no time to do anything else, really. But Wren Baker even kind of wanted to drag that out. He dragged that out. Everybody out there was saying, Wren, there's no time to do this. You got to do the interim thing. You can't drag this out. Do the coach search next year. This is going to be a lost year. Everyone knows it. Huggins screwed you. That's reality. There were people saying that. Everyone was saying that. And Wren was like, no, I love doing a national search. I want to do my national search. Like, he just wants to do the national search. Let him cook. Let Wren Baker cook. Let him cook right now. He's cooking. He's doing the national search.
Let him bake.
Let him bake. Let him cook. I think you might as well. You didn't trust the climb. I think you can trust Wren Baker. I think that's been proven to this point. You got to feel bad for Wren Baker a little bit and everything he's had to deal with. But I do think he knows it's important.
He's had an exciting 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, to say the very, very least. And yeah, I mean, we bring up Mark Kellogg all the time as the one slam dunk. He had tons of drama off Don P before that.
Oh, my God, yeah.
There was tons of drama, and I reported, and I'll stand by it to this day. Don P was flat lying about some things, and the program, including WVU, was flat lying about some things so that it wasn't as dramatic as it was. But there was tons of drama there. I know that was the only moment that I think Wren was annoyed with me because I wasn't letting anybody lie about that situation because it was just all bullshit. Basically, a lot of bullshit was going on. And, that doesn't have to occur here because of the way this ended. But yeah, let Wren bake, let Wren cook. I'll let Wren bake might be better because it's not as common. We'll let Wren bake because it's the B and B thing. Let Wren bake, let Wren bake as be the baker that he is. So got to get that in a t-shirt somewhere. But so we've been doing this for an hour and a half now here.
Yeah,
I like the chat action here, and just looking at this live engagement, we didn't do this for no reason. So I'm happy we did this. It allowed us to vent. We both writing about 15 articles a piece here. So it was nice to take a break from this. Probably missed 18 commits that are decommitting here during the show. But you have anything else? I mean, obviously we're going to do more shows. We're going to talk about this more. We're going to be writing about this more. This is going to be happening more. This is not a thing that's going to be done tomorrow. And I really hope we do hear from Wren. I imagine we're going to get a Wren Baker press conference, maybe even during the search before the announcement. We got that with basketball.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get it this week.
Yeah, maybe 100% it could be this week. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that almost, just lose all the commits. Wren Baker does his thing and that's it. And but we'll see. But do you have anything else to add right now? I guess
I just want to say, and I'm sure you agree with Mike. I want to wish Neal Brown the best wherever he ends up, whatever's next
100%.
for him.
Yeah.
Wherever his family goes, I just wish him the best, and I hope it's as easy an experience of getting fired as it can be for him. Because he, everybody liked him. He was a nice guy. But it's a business. I got fired a couple months ago. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were doing a good job too. You were doing a good job.
I appreciate that. So just best wishes to Neal. I hope even the people that really wanted him fired, I hope they can at least say, "Hey, Neal, didn't work out. Good luck to you."
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't echo that more. And I do think it was a situation where a lot pointed to Neal Brown having success when he first got hired, and it didn't work out. So it does leave the fans reason to have concern about this hire. I get the fan angst. So I guess kind of what I want to say here in closing right now. I get the fan angst. I get why there are fans who think this may not work out, and Wren Baker may swing and miss here because, say, the past AD did. I get the reason why you're being negative because this is coming off a dark 6-year stretch. You're not coming off of even what it was. But I also think that there's tons of reason why this can work out, that it can end positively in the future. And this might honestly be best for WVU and even Neal Brown. Like, I think just this year, I think he was really happy after the 2023 that he at least had that year to shut those people up. I do think in the summer and the spring of this year that he was happy. He was more jovial than he was the year before where he was stressed. I'm happy that I got to see a positive side of Neal Brown because covering him in 2022 for sure, he didn't care about anyone's kids or family. He was pissed. He was a malcontent the whole damn year basically. And we were going viral, but he wasn't having any fun. And I do think in 2023, thumbing his nose at people who were saying you're going to win 4 games, they win 9 and they win a bowl. And they do it with that much of an atmosphere and crowd in Charlotte that he really enjoyed that and he had some fun. And then this year obviously has not been fun for him. So I do hope that he finds peace somewhere else. And if it's freaking UMass, then it's a lot less money. And I don't think that's going to happen because the money doesn't make sense. But now that he's getting his buyout from West Virginia, because part of those reports were he was just going to give up all his WVU money. Now he's getting his WVU money. If he wants to go back to UMass and say, I'll do it for less money because I'm getting all this cash from WVU and I'm going to try to win there. And that's my school and it's a lower level, but I'm just going to be happy there because the pressure is not the same there, then more power to him. More power to him. Maybe that, maybe your peace of mind is an important thing because I do think, again, that while I get the fan angst and Neal Brown's tenure was not good enough or successful, no matter what you think of WVU, it had to end. It maybe should have ended earlier. That I hope that when a new coach comes aboard, or how Darren DeVries is treated right now, because you lose the brawl and the same people that love the hire wanted him fired, fired. That was comments on the site. And I mean, that was said, and now they're all back on the wagon. I just hope the new coach, especially if he doesn't have a West Virginia connection, or even if he does, because he may not, is treated better, win or lose. Yeah. I think even though it was not successful enough and the Neal Brown needed to eventually be fired and this had to be the decision, I don't think anyone can say he was treated well, and I don't think he was even treated fairly. And I don't think that, as great as the W fan base is, and it's maybe the most passionate fan base in the entire country, you could argue that, we saw a real dark part of that fan base during the Neal Brown tenure that I don't think we've ever seen before. Like, I hope the new coach comes in, and if he loses the backyard brawl, his kids don't have to worry about going to a movie, because Neal Brown's kids had to worry about that. So there has to be some sense of reason that it also may take a year or two to get this going, even though that's not the situation now. I know Signetti turned it around Indiana real quick, and other coaches have done that, but just expecting to walk in and win the Big 12 was a bit of a rough expectation, and everyone just hopefully can just calm down a little bit, because everyone got their way now. The Neal Brown tenure is over. There should not be continuous Neal Brown commentary next July, next September. That is a thing. There are some people who have been making money off just hating Neal Brown, and that cow is gone. So if you're still doing that a year from now, then you're exposing yourself as more of a Neal Brown hater than a WVU lover. So we'll see who those people are, but I think that'll get exposed real soon, because there are some people that I think secretly like Neal Brown staying on because they could just rip him apart every day.
Yeah.
And that is now gone, and hopefully he does have a mental piece of it wherever he lands. And I've said this, and if he wants to hear my advice, if UMass is your thing, UMass is your thing. If UMass is not your thing, I recommend that he humbles himself and goes to the assistant route and really wins big. I think the what Lane Kiffin did, what other coaches have had to do, go the assistant route is a big program. He's very well liked. I think he can get one of those spots, and then try to experience winning to that level without hearing the vitriol and without dealing with this crap from the fans, because you're not the head coach. You don't have to be in the press conference. Enjoy that ride for a year or two. I think it'll help him mentally. I think it'll help his value. And I think he is still young enough. He will get another major job if he does that. I think if he stows the UMass route and wins there, he might never get back to the Big 12 or this level. But I think that route can work, and it might even be better for him mentally. Because UMass is a rough turnaround, a real rough turnaround, even at that level. There's no guarantee he has success there, even if he's the second coming and he's the hometown kid. So we will see what happens. That'll do it for this live broadcast. I do appreciate everybody who's chatted along, everyone who's watched this. A lot more of you watched than chatted, but a lot of you chatted as well. So I do appreciate that. And, before I forget, I also do an ad. Neal Brown didn't win enough big games. Factual. This needs said, he almost single-handedly repaired a lot of crap that was left to him. And I do think Dana Holgorsen is slandered a lot in his legacy. He did have multiple 10-win seasons. He did win an Orange Bowl. He did win a conference title. It was not crap the whole time there, but he also left him nothing. And I don't even just mean the roster. He left him just a locker room filled with malcontents and cancers and a horrible atmosphere. And you didn't have the transfer portal rules at that time. Pat McAfee alums, I can tell you there are former alums of the program that said they were not welcome around during Dana Holgorsen. The second Neal Brown got hired, his first order of business was to get back all those people. And he did.
Blaine Stewart's mom had not been in the football facility in years.
The mom.
And she lives up the street. And Neal obviously brought that family back, brought Blaine back. And like you said, Mike, fixed a lot of bridges, repaired a lot of bridges.
So that's
positive. Why people like them.
There is positive of Neal Brown. There is positive Neal Brown. There's positive to remember of Neal Brown. Not every coach is going to go and win you titles. There's positive of Neal Brown. And I do hope eventually, whenever the program claims its 16th conference title and gets back to national relevance, that there is at least someone who sits there and says, you could argue if it wasn't for Neal Brown, if you think Pat McAfee is the influence that's going to hire this guy, if it wasn't for Neal Brown, would Pat McAfee be back in good graces with this program? Pat McAfee was not welcome back there for a period of time. Rasheed Marshall I had him on a show. He said this. It's not me breaking news. He said this on our show that we had. Rasheed Marshall did not feel welcome there. He lived in Pittsburgh. He was could drive an hour. Like he wanted to go back there all the time. Neal Brown brought him back in. Mike Logan's another one. He didn't feel welcome. He couldn't get a ticket during the Dana Holgerson era. He told me that directly. He's been asked to go multiple times by Neal Brown. So all of those people now that are tweeting and saying, here's who I want hired or what job I want or this is what should happen, they weren't even allowed in the facility before Neal Brown. And it sounds ludicrous. I understand. But that was the case. So he brought all that back. And there's something might need to be said about that. Like if you think those guys have influence, I don't think they would have this influence if not for Neal Brown in a way. But yes, I do feel bad for him in a way. I do think he's a nice guy. I don't think a lot would happen to him needed to occur, even if he was going to be fired. I do get the fan angst, but I just hope that now, handle your next relationship better than, the other one. Before I got married, I had some poor relationships. I was a douchebag in a couple of those. And then I had, I'll admit, like but then I'm not going to make that same mistake in this one. You don't make the same mistake you made with Neal Brown with the next guy. That if he loses a game, you're not going to go undefeated every year. You're going to lose a game. Let's not put a billboard up every loss. And I get it. It took 6 years to do that. I get 6 years is too much. But I do think everybody needs to self-reflect. I don't think anybody conducted themselves properly during that whole tenure. And I hope Neal Brown sleeps tonight more peaceful than he slept in 6 years. And I honestly do believe – I think Neal Brown came to terms months ago that this was probably going to happen. And I do think Neal Brown was mentally preparing. And I think Neal Brown probably is at peace and is okay with this. I regardless of his career, I think it was not going to get better. I don't think, for him and his family. So I think this is the best case scenario for everybody. Again, check WVU Sports Now for all of our coverage, and we're going to have more of these and more live. Maybe we will if we're going to get this kind of action. But definitely subscribe to Mountaineer Report for more of our vocal coverage of this as well.